Okay, now Rajeshwari, can you show us some way how to approach any question? If you could, like for example, if you have any question in your mind, and show how would you approach it?
Have already taken the very first question from my own notes before this class that you made us write in the crash course class of the first class itself that how did intellectual forces led to the emergence of sociology. This is the first question and it is a very simple question every sociology student might be knowing, but
Superb.
I have to share my experience of writing that answer, how I was very deviant initially because when the question was given by you and when the timer was set in for this question, how did intellectual forces led to the emergence of sociology? What I started writing is since 16th century Europe, like Renaissance and scientific revolution, French Revolution, and all I was writing. But the exact question was, how did intellectual forces led to the emergence? What are the question was not like what are the intellectual forces. My answer was to what are all the intellectual forces there. So that catch I made it only after attempting this question. So my sincere request to every student is try attempt the question by own self because while reading the question, our eyes will be going into these keywords. Intellectual forces leading to the emergence of sociology. Question is how intellectual forces have led to the emergence of sociology. And the correct approach, see, I have written this word here, correct approach. That is the answer given by you. In that, I came to understand that first we have to explain the intellectual forces and we have to explain the counter enlightenment theories also because that is the synthesis of or evolution of sociology. That is what they have asked in the question. And the second thing I have to say in the writing is that, sir, you would be insisting in every class we have to have this connection between the lines. We should not leave it abstract ways. Introduction, body, conclusion, not like that. If you are introducing the question with the intellectual forces, and then we have to say that until the arrival of intellectual society, the European society was very stable. So when we introduce this sentence in between, we have the better connection and what is the reason for counter enlightenment theories. And we have to write what is the counter enlightenment theories. And then finally we have to give the conclusion is that so by these two things, that is enlightenment and counter enlightenment theory, the new discipline sociology have evolved. So this is how the answer has to be there. This was in my correct approach. This question I wanted to share that how much I was deviant in my previous approach of the question, and I learned from this. Okay, we have to catch the keyword. What is the demand of the question? What is asked? So this is how I feel, and this connecting terms, however, until that like that what was before it and how it is connected to the next context of the question, those one or two connecting lines give us very much clarity in this question and answer, and it will also ease the evaluator, sir. It
Yes.
won't trouble the evaluator. It would be very easy flowing and he would be awarding marks without even thinking what is he saying, or else we will make a difficult situation for the evaluator so that we will be end up in difficult situation with the lower marks. So I felt that.
Very nicely explained, Rajeshwari. Very nicely explained. So, uh, talking about the same question, let's just understand how usually students would approach it. Okay. You also already pointed out that students would end up writing intellectual forces like Renaissance, scientific revolution, everything, but they may not explain how sociology emerged eventually from these. A second approach which students often have in their mind is that they simply write the name of the intellectuals, which means they write Descartes, Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, Rousseau, but they don't write intellectual forces. So they confuse intellectual with intellectual forces. And again, even in this, they don't explain how sociology emerged. And the third thing is that they write everything, but they don't explain in general how these forces, which you pointed out, caused instability in Europe
Mm.
And
Actually, that one line is
yeah,
the key line for the answer itself, sir. But
def-
what we will be thinking that I have written every intellectual forces, I have known some 10 intellectual forces, so the answer is perfect. But that concept we have to be very clearly explaining that is the key of the answer, sir.
that is the key, definitely. Because the moment I heard from you that statement, that these forces caused instability, immediately as a reader, I got very impressed. Okay, because now I knew that she is going to write the demand of the question.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Better we
So,
can underline the word also, that instability word. Not we have to over underlining the in the answer, because I don't prefer over underlining, but some keywords are there and some twisting points or turning points that will be in the answer. So that if we highlight it, we will just have some free flow in the answer.
great. So for the general audience, I will just simply tell one thing: why intellectual forces causing instability was the main point. Because as a sociologist, we look at society as a stable system, uh, s- and we are interested to know what causes instability in the system and what brings stability back in the system. Okay, this is the basic idea of a sociologist, especially the one who are conservative are concerned about stability. They don't want any sort of instability. So these forces caused instability. In reaction to this, some conservatives emerged who were seeking stability. And the confrontation between the two was actually showcasing to us that social order goes through such kind of periods of upheavals, and sociologists must understand this upheavals in a scientific fashion. So discipline emerged to study what causes social equilibrium, what causes disturbance in the equilibrium. Great. And when it comes to
Sir, and one thing I have to just supplement in your this thing, sir. When you are dictating the answer, I felt that the answers would be the lines would be very sharp and crisp. The thing is what you have explained in my notes. I have just written in 1.5 to 2 lines. That explains it in a very crisp manner. It won't be taking much space in my answer also. That was also very helpful, because we won't be addressing the demand of the question until the second page, and we will start only addressing it in the second page, and we will be having some what to say, from some 10 to 12 lines in the last half of the page. We will dump the answer there. That will again won't be helping us in getting marks. So
P-
that was very helpful.
yeah, because yeah, in fact, in most of the cases, sociology develops in the last paragraph without any
Yes,
context.
sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So we simply say hence sociology developed. Okay. And when it comes to paper two, Rajeshwari, how would you solve a question from paper two like this if you were to give any example?
For paper two, one sec, sir, I will be referring my notes. Okay, so
Or you may even give another example from paper one.
yes, sir, I can give another example from paper one.
Okay.
Does scientific method make sociology a science? Illustrate your answer with Dawkins method. The question was, does scientific method make sociology a science? Illustrate your answer with Dawkins method. And what was my initial answer was that I was writing every theory of Dawkins. And I was explaining that this is how he explained the sociology in a scientific way. But the question here is, scientific method is the keyword. Does scientific method make sociology a science? We have to illustrate it with Durkheim. We should not explain the answer, explaining the theory of Durkheim here. That was the mistake I was made earlier, because once we see a thinker as a student, once we see a thinker in the question, we would directly jump into that thinker and we would be elaborating those things. But the question is that we have to illustrate with the Durkheim's method. The exact
Mm,
demand is, does scientific method make sociology a science or not? Just we have to take the help of Durkheim here. What we would do is we would be explaining for 2 pages all the Durkheim theories. See, this is the scientific methods Durkheim have used, like that. That was my mistake here. And what was the correct approach was simply explaining the what is scientific method. That was the introduction because they have asked about scientific method, and the connecting line is the main key. I have to say to everyone here, because after explaining what is scientific method, how we get into the answer is by these two lines. To impart the scientific orientation in the study of the social world, scientific methods were initially borrowed from natural science. So we are addressing like this is what is scientific method and for what scientific method is used in social science studies, and then getting into the how sociology is made a science through scientific methods. In that I'm getting emailed as the example. So I'm doing like I'm exactly hitting the demand of the question. Like I am writing answer with the help of Durkheim's theory. I'm not explaining Durkheim's theory there, so I have to be clear on it. And in the conclusion part, I also must have mentioned about this non-positivism, because their question is, does scientific method make sociology a science or not? So we have to give us short mention of not scientific method fully have explained the sociology. There is another concept that is non-positivism was also introduced because of Durkheim's criticism is there. So that won't be occupying half or one page of my answer, just a short para before a conclusion. And then in the conclusion, those scientific methods were used, human factor is not included there. So to refine itself, non-positivist approach was also included. Like that, if we conclude the answer, it would be a wholesome, it would be narrative story, sir.
Okay. So,
Actually, I am getting exactly the answer which you have dictated, sir.
and the best thing is that you clearly mentioned that Durkheim is not the hero in this question. Hero is scientific method, and Durkheim was just an example, as examiner expects us to write, because usually when a student would see this question, he would, as you rightly pointed out, end up writing everything that he knows about Durkheim and then hence prove that he is using scientific method, something like this. Okay, he may start talking about suicide and all that. So
That was the thing I also made. I was writing the suicide, the release, and everything. I was writing that one fetch mark.
yeah, yeah, great, great. So I hope students, you are able to connect with these issues that generally are experienced by a beginner when he is approaching the question for the first time, and then the very journey of undoing those things and learning what is required and to adapt to the requirement of the question gradually, because it takes time. It is not one or two class or one or two session, but with regular practice you get habituated to identify the keyword and understand and maintain patience and maintain a flow in the answer.